This Sunday is the seventh Sunday in Ordinary Time. Our Gospel for much of Ordinary Time is taken from St. Luke's account. We hear about Jesus teaching his disciples. As we listen to the Gospel, we can think of ourselves as those disciples. He is really teaching us. Our Gospel this week comes from Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 38. Let's take a listen. Jesus said to his disciples, "To you who hear, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather love your enemies and do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing, will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you." Jesus' teaching this week enters the complicated world of relationships, how we treat our enemies. Do you have enemies? How do you treat them? We think of enemies on the world stage, countries or regions of the world that have been at odds with one another. In some cases, having an enemy and provoking that enemy has led to war, to death, injury, and the destruction of property. If you were one of the disciples listening to Jesus' teaching, and he said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you," what would you have thought? What do you think now as you reflect on these words? Does it seem possible to love our enemies? It does seem like a real challenge. He goes on to say, "For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you?" It is easy to agree that it is, easy or easier to love those who love you. There may be small sacrifices involved, but even those may not be too difficult. If we are to love our enemies, there surely will be sacrifices that we will have to make. The sacrifice, Jesus seems to be saying, is worth it. Those who were once enemies can become reconciled. They can begin to understand one another. They may be more open to listening to the other. It starts with sacrifice. Perhaps it involves negotiation and compromise. Jesus himself is a great witness of how to love your enemies. From the cross, he says, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do." He offers forgiveness to those who put him to death on the cross. Through his sacrifice, he brings about the possibility of reconciliation, even with enemies. He models what he asks us to do when it comes to our enemies. Perhaps we even need to be careful in how we define our enemies, in how we measure what they have done to make us enemies. He says in that gospel passage, "For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you." In our own lives, how is it that someone crosses that line to become an enemy? How do I make that assessment? How do I judge? Jesus calls us to be careful how we judge others. The gospel gives us much to think about as we live our lives of faith day in and day out. Let the gospel fill your week. By the way, I'm standing in the front of our church near the entrance with a display of soup. Our Super Bowl challenge. More than 800 cans of soup have been brought in to be donated to the North Kingstown Food Pantry. Thank you so much for your generosity if you haven't had a chance to see all of the good work that you have done. See you in church. For now, God bless.